Hello there, welcome back to my channel. So it's lockdown 2.0 in the UK at the moment, so I'm out today on a local walk, getting in my daily exercise. But I've decided during the lockdown I'm going to put together a series of hints and tips videos which I hope will prove to be useful and informative for beginner hikers, but also any experienced hikers out there. I'll also be interested to get your thoughts in the comments below, whether any of the experiences I'm going to share resonate with yourself. So the subject or the topic of today's video, I'm going to share probably the 3 most important mistakes I made as a beginner hiker, the reasons why, and what I learnt from those. I hope you enjoy the video. So mistake number 1 was definitely not using the right clothing for hiking. So I'll tell you a story. One of the first big hikes that I ever did was I went up Kinder Scout which is in the Peak District National Park in the UK. In May, so a month that isn't that cold in the UK. And the clothing that I chose to wear was, I think I had a cotton t-shirt, cotton cargo trousers, a fleece and a super dry coat. And anyone who's been up a mountain before knows that very often the weather and the temperatures on in the valleys and on the ground can be a lot different to what you experience up in the mountains. And I think it's fair to say that that definitely happened to me. So the day in question, only light showers were forecast, but unfortunately they turned into heavy rain for about 2 hours, and temperatures on the top of the mountain that day were below freezing. And let's just say that my super dry coat didn't live up to his name. It definitely wasn't super dry, and as a result I got soaking wet through to the point where the water had seeped through the coat, through the fleece and through the t-shirt, and I was absolutely freezing cold. In fact, I go as far as to say that if I'd have got an injury that day and been stationary for any length of time, I would have been in some serious trouble. I was that cold. So, obvious lesson learnt there. You know, wear the right clothing for hiking. You don't need to spend a fortune. A technical base layer to wick away sweat, something warm as a mid layer, depending on the temperatures that you're expecting to encounter on the day, and obviously a good waterproof jacket. You know, I've been out in some absolutely horrendous conditions since, but wearing the right clothing and the right equipment, you know, although it's not been the most pleasant, you know, it never is as good walking in the rain as it is in the sunny weather like today, but it makes for a much more enjoyable experience, and might just save your life if you get into the if you get held up in really foul conditions. So definitely, lesson learnt number 1: wear the right type of clothing for the conditions that you're expecting to encounter. It makes for a much more pleasurable hike, trust me. Okay, so hiking mistake number 2. I'm going to stick in the what we wear for hiking category. And that's, in my early days, I definitely didn't pay attention to wearing the right kind of footwear. And I include socks in this category. So, the story here. One of the first long distance walks I did, very low level. I think I walked about 15 or 16 miles. And at the time I was wearing some fairly cheap hiking shoes, but they were proper hiking shoes, that I'd ordered online and not tried on. And I was wearing some of those cheap sports socks where you get about 4 pairs of socks for £5. Let's just say, when I got back from the hike, my foot was pretty much, or both feet were pretty much just covered in blisters, to the point where it was difficult to actually put my feet on the ground and walk around the house. A very, very, very painful lesson there. So, top tip number 2 is, firstly, invest in some good quality walking socks. Yes, they might be a bit more expensive than sports socks, but they wick sweat away from your feet and they make the overall hiking experience a little bit more enjoyable. And of course, hiking boots or hiking shoes, depending on your preference. A well-fitted, comfortable pair of hiking boots, for me, can make a walk definitely into a more enjoyable one. Personally, I'd rather spend a bit more on my hiking footwear than clothing, because there's nothing worse than trying to walk when you've got blisters starting to develop. So, hiking socks, plenty of shops sell them online. Hiking footwear, try them on before you buy, and once you've bought them, some will need more bedding in than others. Don't go on a 20-mile walk the day you take them out the box. Gradually wear them in before you start to build up the miles. So, mistake and top tip number 2 is invest in good walking socks and a pair of walking boots or shoes that are up for the job that you're looking to use them for. Okay, so hiking mistake number 3, and that's overestimating your own ability. Now, I could tell you lots of stories here, because it has taken me a while to actually learn this lesson. But a couple that spring to mind actually relates to a position that I put my poor old wife in, and that was last year. We went up to the Lake District in the winter to do some walking, and by this point I'd like to say that I was a fairly experienced hiker, but my wife, not so. And whereas by last year, a hike up to some of the highest peaks in the Lake District to me weren't a massive challenge, she'd got very little experience of that. So, I took her on a walk, not fully factoring in her level of capability. And anyway, let's just say, to cut a long story short, we ended up in a bit of difficulty and had to call out the mountain rescue team, which wasn't great. Taking time up of the volunteers, putting them at risk having to come and rescue us, purely because I took my wife on a walk that really was probably too challenging for her at that time, based on her experience. I've also not learnt that lesson myself. You'll probably see my playlist of videos, and I'll put a link to it in the description. I recently undertook my first ever long distance hiking trail, and the daily mileages that I took on were mileages that I'd not been used to covering. And to cut a long story short, again, I developed an injury and couldn't complete the trail. And this is a kind of common theme that I think a lot of people experience. In our sense of adventure, we try to take on things that we've not done before. So my advice here, and it's advice I'm taking myself now, I promise, is start off small and work your way up. You know, tackling some of the highest peaks in England in the middle of winter, if you've got very little hiking experience, you know, it might work out for you, but in all likelihood it will end in you know, in difficulty. So that's tip number 3. Know your own limits, stick to them, set yourself goals by all means and work up to those, but definitely don't bite off more than you can chew. Okay, so just before I summarise, I should point out that my wife has now forgiven me for her experience with the mountain rescue team. I hope you found those stories interesting and those tips useful. They may sound like common sense, but it's amazing how many people make those mistakes. You know, every day when I'm out hiking, I see people walking mountains wearing the wrong footwear, wearing the wrong type of clothing. We've all been there. No one should judge anybody for making those early mistakes. It's by learning from the experience of others that hopefully helps us avoid them in the future. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're new to hiking, have these stories and these tips helped? Equally, if you're an experienced hiker, share in the comments below. Are there any tips that are different to these that you would share with new hikers? That way we can all help each other enjoy the hills and mountains a lot more safely. So thank you for watching. Please look out for future videos. As I say, I'm going to try and do a couple of these during the lockdown, just to give people some helpful hints and tips for when it's safe to get back out into the hills and mountains again. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you all soon.